All right, it looks like we're live. Doing my first scheduled live stream here, trying to do some Q&A with people. Maybe we'll get into some architecture, AWS stuff. Been working with somebody on a project. Working is not the right word. I've been advising someone on how to build something, and maybe I'll go through kind of that design and show people what I was thinking about with that. It's a kind of a data ingestion engine. So, but first, let's make sure everything is working. Looks like people can hear me. I don't know if anybody's going to tune in to this first one, and that's okay. It's all about practice, right? I think the first thing I'm going to do in these is go through some Reddit threads that I've curated over the past couple weeks. Go through each one and just answer them on stream. Ones I'm interested in anyway. A lot of these questions are really either really advanced or just not interesting to me. So I've got Reddit up here. We're just going to go through and see what we can find. First things first, Elastic Beanstalk. I'm not interested in Beanstalk at all. Used it a little bit in the past, and it's an easy way for people to get started in AWS, but I think it's extremely limiting in terms of flexibility or even the features that are available. So I stay away from it. I don't really like it. Oh, databases. I'm not really a database expert either. You know, I've done some SQL administration in the past and work pretty heavily with DynamoDB right now. But it's not just a art. It's black magic, really. When you get underneath the hood, you start doing query optimizations and that stuff is just something I've never felt compelled to dig into. So I don't really have a lot of recommendations around databases and such. You know, if we need to scale it, you know, then I'm going to pretty much always throw DynamoDB at it right now. It's just the easiest and lowest cost way to have a scalable database. Oh my god. VPCs are super complicated, and you almost always see a question about how do I set up my VPC in AWS every week. It's really complicated. You know, networking is its own discipline, and the way Amazon manages their database or their networks, you don't have to have a ton of knowledge to build VPCs, but there are just certain, you know, when you get into routing and CIDR blocks and IP space, there's just some skill gap out there for people who end up building a lot of these things. Soft phones, I don't care about soft phones. Yeah, I don't know. This is interesting. They're going to do an AWS migration. Let's look at that. Small SaaS company uses private cloud to deliver our service for the migration, and now they want a contractor. Oof. So they've already started the migration, and then they're looking for a contractor. My instincts tell me that they didn't do any infrastructure as code. They probably don't have any CI/CD pipelines or any automation to speak of. if I were looking at this job, if I were thinking that I'm going to take this on, I would ask those questions. Let's say like, from the ground up, like let's start with the AWS account and say, how many products do they have? How many developers or people are they going to have in the account? Ask how many accounts they have, because they should absolutely have more than one. Just get into the business questions, like what's wrong with your private cloud? Why do you want to move to AWS? Why not Azure? Why not Google Cloud? Just to kind of get into understanding, where they're coming from. A lot of people jump on, AWS is a pretty solid bet. It's a really good product, but a lot of people go for the familiar rather than exploring all of the options. And sometimes I think that's a good idea. Like if you're doing a prototype, seeking out the familiar is a good thing. If you're going to write it in a language you understand, it might not be the most optimal language for what you're doing, but at least it'll get you out, get some kind of a MVP out the door. But there should be, you should, in that roadmap that you're planning, you should pencil in like, hey, we should reevaluate tech decisions, after the first thing is proven out. In the past, when I've talked to people about jobs like this, where they just want a contractor to come and help, they probably just want somebody to log into the account, stand up some EC2 instances, and be done with it. I would ask way more questions, strategic questions, not so much like how many VMs or things, but like, do they anticipate growth? Do they anticipate a need for scaling? Because there could be a lot more higher level work available in this contracting engagement that even the person posting this may not realize. So more questions. Questions are always good to ask. Let's see, what else do we have here? Redshift. I've just started looking into Redshift as a reporting system with my day job, and there's a lot more there for me to learn, so we're just gonna skip that. I got some questions here from /DevOps too. Ooh, GitOps. This is a hot topic in a lot of places. Practices do your teams use to enable immutable infrastructure with CI/CD and GitOps? Make a change to your application. Do you recreate your entire stack or just your services, leaving network consistent from deploy to deploy? What about changes to just your stack? Oh, these are lots of great questions. I might have to actually answer this one more thoroughly. I really think Git-driven infrastructure is a great practice. So I like to have, first of all, I like to do multiple repos I like a sandwich, so, or a layer cake of infrastructure as code. So the first thing is an account level configuration. And actually there's one before that. Usually it's an organization level repo. In a really sophisticated environment, you would use that to deploy multiple accounts. So you'd have automation tied to that to build out your entire account structure. And then have a repo that defines the kind of base level account infrastructure and automation. So you could put like global parameters. You could put VPC stacks in there. There's a lot of roles that get configured at an account level. So you know, for your developers or whomever is going to get in there for operations. You know, you get your roles defined. They can assume into that account. And you definitely want to have all of that on some kind of CI/CD pipeline. So I like using the Amazon or AWS native tools for that level. So you can use code pipeline with CloudFormation stacks. It starts to get kind of complicated when you have multiple regions. So designing it around multi-region, multi-account, those things can throw a wrench in your plans. I think the big one is stack failures. In the past, I've seen where you have really extensive account stand-up level, you know, account infrastructure where templates will get deployed out that fail, and code pipeline can sometimes be really annoying in, you know, executing in multiple regions at the same time. You gotta like hop in and hunt down where all of these things are blowing up. So that can be a little annoying. And then after you have your account provisioned for all of the resources you need to deploy in there, then your platforms get deployed. So if you're doing a container cluster, if you have shared infrastructure, so if you have like a shared ingress stack, if you're doing like a reverse proxy or like an edge proxy, all those things could be deployed afterward. You'd want some really good documentation around like the process, so that you have almost a run book if you need to stand it all up again. I've got into arguments in the past with people about, you know, repeatable process, and, you know, some of these things that you only do once or twice. I think you should absolutely automate those things because you only do them once or twice, and you never know when you have to do them again, and going back years later to redo something can be really be really challenging if you don't remember how you did it the first time. So yeah, that's a tough one. It's a really almost non-intuitive argument that people argument. It's non-intuitive to automate things you're only ever going to do one time. But if the risk or the impact on that process is high, I would absolutely automate it so that you don't have to, in a situation where you suddenly need to do this again, you don't have to go back and learn. You can just, you know, click the button, run the automation. Sad part is not all automation is future-proof, so you may come back and hit that button and realize that packages have rolled or APIs have changed, and then you're back in the same boat without knowing how to do it, and you got to research it again. So there's a whole discipline around keeping that stuff fresh. But define all that stuff in GitHub or your Git, you know, GitLab or whatever, you know, Git host you have, and drive those changes from code. I often use CloudFormation for all of my account level, or even, you know, most of my infrastructure, because AWS comes with, you know, managed. It's a managed infrastructure as code solution from AWS. You don't have to really set up anything around it. If you're using code pipeline, you know, CloudFormation is a provider on the pipeline. It all ties together really well. So there's usually very little in setting it up yourself. And then all that stuff gets versioned and deployed. You know, I try to treat my my account structure, my network structures, all of that the same way I would treat my applications, you know. So can I deploy multiple versions of it? Can I version it? Can I roll it back? Think about all those things when designing this stuff. And then you just decide at like what life cycle is appropriate for your app, and then that determines like what do you create. You know, do you create a whole new stack, or do you just create stacks for individual services? I like to do a stack per service myself. It keeps everything in a nice space for troubleshooting. This question right here I think is really interesting. The artifact generation. I like to spit out in my pipeline, you know, generate the artifacts, the CloudFormation templates, whatever you have, push them into some kind of repository. I often just use S3 because it's there, it's available. It has pretty much all the features I need. It has metadata on top of the objects. There's lots of things you can do. I don't think you really need to make it that complicated. But definitely output those artifacts, store them in S3, and then drive all of your changes from that, rather than going back to your source control to generate your artifacts. If the artifacts are missing, you can do that. If you've accidentally enabled a life cycle on your bucket that destroys a whole bunch of your artifacts or something. But yeah, I like to drive all of that. You know, the events come from Git, whatever your Git provider is. I've been migrating away from GitHub, moving towards GitLab. I think their CI/CD offering is a lot stronger. Anyway, that's a fun one. I think I'm gonna answer this one text later because that's a great question. Oof, Selenium. So it's just to connect to the WebDriver. Yeah, front end development is not something that I'm super skilled in right now. I'm trying to learn. I'm working on a personal project. I got it whiteboarded over here. I'm not going to turn the camera, but got some front end and some back end. Pretty extensive serverless back end, and then a Vue.js with WebSockets front end. That's that's another project that I'll do on this stream because I think it's going to be really interesting. But I have so much more to learn with front end development, and you know, all of the JavaScript frameworks that have come out since I kind of became a dedicated DevOps cloud resource. Back when I was doing front end development, everything was jQuery, and you know, there was no virtual DOMs or abstractions or anything. You just manipulated the tables or you know, the divs or whatever you're doing using your super special CSS selectors and all that. So yeah, got a long way to go. And then once I get decent at that, then we'll get into, you know, testing UIs and stuff. With my work project, we have a lot of pretty extensive testing in the UI, and I watch the way they work with that, and it is complicated, and anything they can get working in there is very impressive because of how hard it is. All right, what are we at here? 20 minutes. Let's see if we can get anybody in this stream. I had a friend ask me last night if I was going to do this, so I had to. I'm just going to text it to him. We'll see if he gets in. We'll see if that does anything. I know a lot of people who try to do these things where they decide they want to be a live streamer or, you know, get involved in this stuff, and they overlook the hard work of getting attention, getting noticed, driving people towards your platforms or your social media pages. And so they'll get in here and they'll do, you know, live streams and nobody will watch. I don't expect anybody to tune into these things for probably the first 2 or 3 months, because you know, I don't do this to build an audience or to, you know, be a YouTuber like you know, like my daughter says. You know, that's not my goal here. My goal is to create in a longer term content that can show, you know, my ability over time. So the more of these things I do, the more of the questions I answer, it all just becomes a big body of work that I can reference later when, I don't know, when I need to. I'm preparing for the future and I don't know what that future looks like. Just trying to lay the best foundation I can, you know, just in case stuff happens. Oh, got some people commenting on a couple of my posts. I still don't see anybody tuning in. That's all right though. I'm gonna get really good at talking to myself. Let's see if, nope. I think one hang up is that, you know, streaming at 7 a.m. in the morning, just nobody's awake. It's hard to entice people to get in here. All right, let's do a couple more AWS questions, and then I think I gotta get ready, get to work. Actually, let's check in on work and make sure nothing is on fire. I don't expect anything to actually be broken. We're really early in our development process. We're so early, in fact, we have very little monitoring or alerting or really any kind of notifications in our environment, which is absolutely an anti-pattern. Don't do that. Get alerting set up as soon as you can. Ooh, so in most projects, organizations, I don't know, whatever, our project, you know, when I first wake up in the morning, I'll go in and I will make sure that I'll go in and check alarms. There's generally a lot of stuff that indicators that you'll have in your application. So really you should have alerting set up on a lot of your key performance indicators. So if you're an e-commerce app, you definitely want to have some kind of gauge of how well is your app doing. You know, are you converting sales? Are you driving traffic to the website? Are you is all your stuff working? Even if you don't have, even if you're not alerting on things like CPU, network traffic, volume, that kind of stuff, like just make sure that people can reach the site. Make sure that you have sales going through on a regular cadence that you expect. Generally, you want to be able to know when your stuff is not working earlier than your customers do. Don't crowdsource your alerts. That's generally a bad practice. But from like a DevOps perspective, I usually log in the morning, check to see if there's any infrastructure issues. So, are there any alarms? Are there any active alerts or incidents or anything going on that I could help with? If you don't have that role in your company, then look at the things that are under your control. Previously, we've managed container platforms. So I would log in the morning, whenever I get online, or I used to have before coronavirus, had a long 45-minute bus commute. So I would hop on the bus in the morning, log into the VPN, and then hop on and see, how's the container platform doing? Do we have enough nodes or not so much enough nodes, but do we have any containers waiting to schedule? Do we have any alarms about scaling in or out? Or do we have any services that don't have enough containers? These kind of factors I would hop in and check out pretty much every morning. Once that was good, then I would go through and see, the build pipelines. Like, let's go see if there's any pipelines that are stuck or hung up. You can usually scroll through your build dashboard pretty quickly. If you can't, you should probably set that up. So that's what I'm doing right now for my day job. Is I'm going to scroll through. We use Bamboo right now, so there's just kind of an overall view to see how many builds are queued up, how many are running. That's what I'm looking at right now. It's just to see. We've had a lot of problems in the past. We don't manage our team, the platform engineering team. We don't manage the master Bamboo server. That's provided by another group in a different organization. But we provision the actual agents that run the code, and we have to troubleshoot upstream connectivity. When I first joined the project, we had a lot of connectivity issues between our agents in our AWS account and the master, which lives in another AWS account. So frequently we'd log in the morning and all of our agents would be offline. So we'd have, queued up builds. We'd have nightly tests and nightly builds that didn't run. So that's a problem if you have developers that log in earlier than you, because you wake up and they're already mad. So I've gotten in the habit of just checking to make sure that we don't have anything queued up. All of our agents are online. I did this pretty much every day for about 2 months, and it seems like we've worked through some of the stability issues. So now I don't do it quite as frequently. Every once in a while, I like to log in and just make sure, just to keep any egg off our face, Oh, I don't know, my chat popped out. Let's do that. There. Now we can see chat on the screen. Okay, so I don't have any queued builds. Nothing stalled out. So then I'm gonna go. There's a there's a wall board inside Bamboo that gives you kind of a listing of all the jobs that are configured. And I'm just looking at it. It's a green or red status. So you can go through and make sure that they're all green. If any are red, you can click through and figure out what's going on. Most of these are owned by the development teams. Like their responsibility for that, for the performance or the completion of these is on the development teams. So as the DevOps, or whatever you want to call our role that we're in this company, we provision the resources and we help them get them configured, but in the end it's on them. Hey, Benny's online. That's awesome. Thanks for tuning in, Benny. I really appreciate it. Benny and I worked together in the past. He's on the other side of the world, so we didn't get to work together as much as I think I'd like. So yeah, I'm just scrolling through the wall board here in Bamboo and looking at everything that's green and red. We've got one job that has been kind of problematic lately. The development team has been heavy on refactoring some of the libraries and stuff out of it. It's a serverless app, so it uses Lambda and DynamoDB. The main factor here is that they decided to move some of the libraries and stuff out of the main function and into Lambda layer. So there's been a lot of refactoring, and when you start getting into shared code, libraries and stuff, then you really have to be careful about versioning that and making sure that everything gets updated. There was some miscommunication between individuals on the team, and then some of the kind of the newer versions of the services got promoted into a higher environment, but they didn't promote the layer. So the layer was getting deployed into the lowest environment, our dev environment. Everything looked good, everything was happy, people were really happy with the way the layer was working out. So they then said, well, let's deploy these up to QA, our next environment. But they didn't also deploy the layer. So as soon as these lambdas got out there, they just blew up. Couldn't find missing libraries and kind of the general lambda failure states. So yeah, so that's been kind of an issue that they've been working through. I was talking to a new person I'm going to mentor, and he was asking about what kinds of problems solve, and I said, most of the hardest problems in this industry you don't write a single line of code to actually solve them. They're all human problems, and this is another one of those where no amount of programming can help you if you don't have a solid process. So work those processes. Make sure you have really good lines of communication. That your organization will live and die on its communication. It kind of calls back to some really old battlefield wisdom from generals in the ancient world. Like, if you can't communicate to your armies, you're gonna die on that hill. That's just how it is. So most of the jobs we care about here are green. We've got some testing jobs or some prototype stuff that's red, but I'm not worried about that. So check chat. Everything's quiet. Chat. Got a ton of emails. I'll hop on and answer those later. Yeah, we'll do that later. Email answering is not my favorite part of the job. All right, let's do some more of these Q&A. Unless Benny's got questions. Maybe he'll sneak some in. Let's see. React and a Lambda function. Ooh, this could be interesting. We're doing this. Do you have to deal with running third-party vendor software on AWS? Oh, Benny had a great question. We do have to deal with that. I work in kind of a pseudo-government space now, and we work for the Treasury, the U.S. Treasury. Sort of. It's really complicated, and I don't want to get into the details. But we have to abide by all their guidelines, and a lot of the stuff we want to deploy has to get approved by security people, by kind of higher up management and stuff. So that process is kind of heavy and takes a long time. So it's really tempting to avoid that and go with things that have already been approved. Well, a lot of the stuff that's already been approved is third-party vendors because they had contractors in the environment, or other projects got it through that process. So we run, and I'm not sure exactly what you mean by third-party. We run Tableau, which is a reporting kind of crystal reports or something along that lines. It'll ingest data, and then you can write custom reports on top of that. That's kind of the big one that we're struggling with right now on AWS. It's complicated because we have a whole bunch of different factors. We don't control any of our AWS, like the base accounts. Those are all provided by another organization to comply with other various regulations and stuff. And then the network also is not managed by us. They're the ones who also determine which ports are open and which things we can connect to. And that has been a real struggle for us because there are ports. Tableau is a ridiculous stack when you actually get in and look at all the processes. There's like 100 or 200 processes that this thing spins up when it boots, and there's dozens of ports that get opened up, and like it's a beast of all these things running. And my coworker that's been working on it has been just banging his head against this thing for weeks, trying to figure out how do we get this thing stood up on Linux instead of Windows. All the articles you find are written for Windows. Oh, Benny, you're in the same boat. That's funny. I actually work for the Federal Reserve Bank now here in the U.S. So it seems like we're in almost the exact same role. Deploying it. Oh, yeah. Benny's deploying almost the exact same thing. It's incredibly challenging, and if you don't have a full perspective of your environment, you can really, my coworker that's been deploying this thing has been just pulling his hair out, trying to figure out like, oh, why is this working? Why is that not working? And without the visibility, it's just dying. We have to get, and it's a third party. It's like a managed service provider, some big like consulting company that actually runs the AWS accounts. So he has to constantly like open tickets with them and have them look, and they say, oh yeah, that port's not open, and it's a nightmare, man. Coming from where we were at, and the kind of the flexibility and freedom we had, it's a completely different mindset. I don't know if you feel the same, but it's been a real struggle for me to adjust sometimes. Shout out to Benny. I don't know if you got an SBS cup, but I did. Let's see, what are we doing? So using React and a Lambda function. So, at work, we're building kind of a React-based single-page app on the front end, and it's going to be customer-facing, meaning the public. So there's a lot of extra hoops for us to jump through to get this thing. Most of the stuff that people have done in our environment are internal on the private network. So there's less stringent review of some of the stuff if it's just going to be private. But we're going to do a public app, so it's extra fun. But we are doing React, doing a single page app. Trying to figure out how to do that with APIs that right now can't be public. So there's a lot of really complicated networking and stuff going on because we don't do a full page render and push that back to the client like most of the other apps we have in the environment. We have just been struggling with some of these things. Okay, so this person, they don't have a lot of backend experience. Trying to run Lambda function, API gateway. In order to test the Lambda functions, you'd use query string parameters. Oh, okay. Use fetch to retrieve. Oh, this is more of a React question than a Lambda question. This is not. I'm guessing this person didn't actually read or understand the question here. So there's two things on this one. Make sure that you're figure out how your React app actually sends. And I think this is where the person's asking, like, how do we get the React application to send the parameters? And then the second factor is, API Gateway has a lot of abstraction over the connection. So you can do a lot of transformations with the request as it comes through from the client to your functions. There's a lot of syntax checking, and there's a lot of operations that can happen on that request before it gets to your function. So most people I see configure API Gateway as just a pass-through, like a proxy setting. It'll be they call it Lambda proxy mode, where it'll just take the request and whatever the client sends to the gateway just ships that straight through to the function, and then people parse and handle the function on the back end. But your API Gateway can do a lot of that for you. And if you understand it, it's really powerful, but it also hides some of the logic inside the gateway configuration rather than in your application code. So that can get a little complicated. And if you're running an API Gateway for more than a few teams, definitely recommend people have a centralized kind of an API team, like a team that thinks about the user experience and kind of curates that API at a high level, and then they should be coordinating a lot of the endpoints and the flows across there just to have a nice consistent experience. I suspect this person's asking, like, how do I do this in React? How do I pass a value in React? Right there. But they could be getting hung up in the gateway too. I don't think so in this case, but it's possible. All right, let's see what else we got here. Cannot ping, but can RDP. Awesome. Ooh, Amazon Workspaces. I don't have any experience with these. We tried to use them previously to do some email and stuff, and it was a really poor experience, so I've just kind of avoided them. Sometimes remote desktops or remote workspaces can be interesting. I just see that they oftentimes take up so much bandwidth that people get annoyed and stop using them. Oh, this is probably going to be a good one. cost-effective cloud exporting CloudWatch to S3. Whenever you get into your log stack, just ignore the words cost-effective, because you're gonna end up just hating yourself. Okay, so they've got a security, some kind of security tool processing their logs and probably trying to flag vulnerabilities or something. They're gonna take just interesting. Inside CloudWatch for a few days due to sheer size. Automate the exporting to S3 for long-term storage. 200 events per second. That's pretty good. That's starting to really get to some serious volume. Lambda step function or Kinesis fire hose. You know, I probably would go with just the Lambda function, because there's just a little less complexity to manage. You can create a subscription on the CloudWatch log group, and every event that emits, have your Lambda consume that and ship that to S3. Let's see, cost effective. So I don't think you're going to spend a lot in compute time, but you might at 200 events per second. What does that end up being? Per minute, per hour, per month, right? So we've got 200 per second per minute, and then there's 730 hours in a month. So you're looking at 525 million Lambda invocations per month. So if you don't know, Lambda bills, you get billed in two ways. You get billed for every time a Lambda function is invoked, and you pay for the millisecond that they operate in chunks of 100 milliseconds. So actually, we can just go to the Lambda pricing page. Load. Also, you have to watch out, you know, regional costs are a thing. You know, most everybody's going to give you an answer in, you know, one of the US East 1 or US East 2 regions, but other regions do have different costs. I don't think Lambda is any different, but there are services that have different costing structures. So we've got right there alone, you know, 20 cents per million. If we just do that one, whoops. No, I just lost it. 200 per second, 60 seconds, 60 minutes. Oh, I suppose I could have just done that. So we have 525 million times 20 cents. So you're paying about $100 a month just on Lambda invocations alone. That's a lot, actually, for this this solution. So maybe their question about Kinesis is a good idea. You know, if you don't necessarily want to do a one-to-one invocation pattern here, you might want to do ship these into a queue. So I think Kinesis actually is going to end up being more cost effective, because every invocation of that Lambda that consumes that would consume multiple records. So it wouldn't be just one record. So that could get that invocation down a little bit. Here's somebody who's doing it on a schedule. Well, this is actually a pretty good answer. You know, have a nightly function that goes through your Cloudwatch log and grabs anything that exists and ship that off to S3. That's actually pretty interesting. The issue there, you know, I don't know if anybody sees the anti-pattern of running, you know, a timer. Any kind of polling-based function is usually subject to failure in that eventually won't complete all of its work inside the time that the Lambda can be invoked. You know, as their volume grows, so they're at 200 per second right now. You know, eventually, you know, as their business grows, maybe they're at 500, or maybe they're at, you know, 1,000 per second. Some poor ops engineer one night is going to get paged when this Lambda starts blowing up, or, you know, because it's timing out. Even worse, if they don't get paged when it starts timing out and those objects start getting old, because they have this expiration rule here. So then you have a gap where, you know, maybe your function isn't finishing in the right time. So your function, you know, invokes every night, processes as many records as it can, hits the timeout on Lambda, doesn't finish. Now that 2-week, you know, backstop starts coming and claiming those records and life cycling them off. You could lose data. You know, you could lose logs here in this kind of pattern because you don't have the right perspective on how these events happen. So if you have alerting on there, that's great. You know, catch it and maybe extend the timeout, maybe go back to, you know, your architecture team and say, hey, we need to redesign this thing. Or maybe you just lose a bunch of logs, and hopefully that's okay in your environment. That would not be cool for us. You know, where I am, we have very strict controls around our logs and ways that we handle that. And I think this would get some people into trouble if there was some kind of lawsuit or, you know, some kind of event that would cause people to be unhappy about that. Yeah, so based on, you know, just some early, you know, napkin math here, I would look into probably some kind of Kinesis stream or some kind of way to consume multiple records. You know, maybe you could do, I'd have to do some research. I don't know if you could do a, you know, Cloudwatch subscription to like SNS and then SQS and let them queue up and consume multiple records with your Lambda function that way. So you drive down the invocations. The actual like processing time, if you're doing any transformation in there, then you'd probably want something more robust. But if you're just doing a simple copy paste on a Lambda to S3, like you're just dumping those things into S3, you probably don't need a whole lot of processing power there. So I don't know that there'd be a lot of optimization. I like these questions. I operate my AWS account very inexpensively. We'll say that I'm really cheap, so I try to build things that are really cost effective, because I just don't like spending, you know, I don't like spending money when I don't have to, and I think it drives good engineering practices as well, because these things scale. You know, scale is always on my mind. So All right, well, I think that's enough for one day. This was mostly just a test to make sure that the streaming works. Benny proved that. Thanks for tuning in, Benny. I really appreciate it. I think I'm going to schedule these out a little bit longer. Maybe I'll post something on a couple my social media profiles and give people a heads up so they can wake up early and clear the sleep out of their eyes and come on here and ask me some interesting questions. I really like this. Oh, yeah. See, Benny's doing some homework for me there. So you can only send it to Lambda or Kinesis. Good call. Yeah. See, you gotta have good people around you to make sure that you're not leading your team down the wrong way. People are willing to look it up and say, like, that's not right. Foster a good culture. All right, I gotta work. I gotta go, do some work today. Even though this is like super fun, I would love to do this all day long. I gotta go wrangle some Node.js builders for the day. Definitely gonna schedule these again. Give people a heads up so that they can tune in. But for now, this is fun. Thanks.